Hello, welcome to today's HDI webinar. We're glad you've joined us for how to deliver high-touch, digital-first tech support. I'm Tim McElgan. I'm the editorial manager and principal analyst at HDI, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we get started, a few housekeeping points to touch on. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, just hit F5 on your computer and that'll refresh your browser window. If you need further assistance, click on the yellow help icon and somebody will get with you right away. We encourage you to ask questions anytime during the discussion. To do that, simply type your questions in the Q&A window on the side of your screen and hit the submit button. We won't necessarily be answering all questions as they come in, but we'll try to get to them at the end or respond to them offline if necessary. Today's presentation will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live event, and everyone on the call will receive an email reminder once it becomes available. And with that, I'm very, very pleased to introduce today's panel. Mike Hansen is an IT executive with more than 30 years of experience leading IT operations, service, and support, and has extensive experience leading globally distributed teams. He is ITIL, Six Sigma, and HDI certified. He's a regular contributor to industry conferences and publications, although, as he mentioned earlier, he owes us a couple of articles. Michael has a focus on IT operation with years of experience building teams from the ground up. He's passionate about building effective, happy teams and leveraging business and IT process improvement techniques to make processes more efficient, cost-effective, and reliable for both the IT staff and their customers. Today, he's the VP of IT Service Desk Operations at PSCU, a premier financial services organization located in St. Petersburg, Florida. Thank you for joining us, Michael. Morny Casanova has spent over 15 years in progressive leadership roles throughout IT operations, IAM, service management, and customer support. She joined T-Mobile in 2017 as a director within the Technology, Service Delivery, and Operations organization, where she leads a geographically dispersed team of technicians and manages strategic service partners. And finally, Marie Russo joins us from today's webinar sponsor, GoTo, formerly LogMeIn, the makers of the Rescue Suite of remote support solutions. Marie is the Director of Product Marketing for Support Solutions at GoTo and plays a key role in helping organizations address buyer needs and hybrid work models through its market-leading remote support solutions. Marie has 20 years of experience understanding contact center and IT needs across a variety of industries, including high-tech, telecommunications, and financial services. Thank you all for joining us today. Okay, let's start off with a high-level view of things, and I'm going to start with you, Mike. What do customers, employees, and business leaders see as, quote-unquote, the future of work? So if you just give us, kind of your broad view on that, again, we'll start with Mike. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, I think from a customer perspective, it's they want to be able to contact support anytime, anywhere. And get meaningful assistance. This could be through either a live person or through self-service, and it's very important that we have a well-developed self-service process, because as our staff gets younger, many will actually prefer using self-service, and they're going to want to be able to use their mobile devices and things like that. From an employee perspective, I think the focus has to be a good work-life balance. This could mean having a strong work from home model, or maybe a good hybrid model, which allows for some ability to work remotely when it's necessary. But I think there's a lot of focus nowadays on that work-life balance, safety, things like that. And as leaders in the business, we have to be able to balance those two needs, the customer and the employee. And this sometimes can present us a challenge, because we have to get a budget for appropriate staffing. I'm sure many of us have been there, right? As well as making things work when we're not appropriately staffed. Again, we've probably all been there. So the question comes up is, how do we actually build a world-class service center while at the same time remaining flexible with employees and being able to provide that level of service to our customers? So we need to be able to work closely with our staff, be more transparent with them than we have been in the past, and leverage technology as much as we can to offset any issues that we may have. You're on mute, Tim.
Tim, we lost your audio.
And there you go. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So as I was saying, we will be diving deeper into each of those topics as we go through this. Marnie, can you share your thoughts, please?
Yeah, I think much of what Mike, what he already said in terms of, a hybrid workforce and things changing. And I think it really goes back to even the title of this webinar, right? It's that digital first tech support model. And for us, it's in the support realm, it's how do you maintain and offer a continued level of service that's deemed high touch for users that are really wanting that high touch. They don't want to self-serve. They want somebody to do it for them. They want kind of that concierge. And here, where I work, we had a very heavy in-person support model through what we would call Tech Express, so like a walk-up center. And our users were very, very keen on that. They love the high touch, just drop it, you fix it, do it. And so as we pivot remote, now we stay remote, be it full-time, hybrid, whatever. It's how do we change that, give them the different avenues to continue to work with us remotely if they want to self-serve and things like that, but also how do we provide that high touch experience while they're remote. And that's been a big thing for us as an organization, as a support organization, looking into the future.
Great. Marie, can you give us your perspective from a solutions provider, as to how you guys are looking at the future of work?
Yeah, certainly. As an organization that builds remote work solutions, this is something that certainly has been near and dear to us. And our data shows that, now nearly, 2 years ago, knowledge workers were sent home to work, right? And now 2/3 of customer care agents on average have a remote or hybrid work situation. And 51% of those same people in that study we did, they're dealing with this increased volume of support requests now, more so than they had 2 years ago. And the majority of those support requests are now being handled remotely. And so I think the biggest challenge also as part of that experience of moving to, of what those remote workers want, right? They want that flexibility. We call it flex work, right? I want the work-life balance. I want to be able to work from home and show you I can still be productive. And there's challenges with that, right? So, we're seeing a massive increase in the use of collaboration tools because the notion of turning and pivoting to a senior tech person sitting next to you to help with the troubleshooting a mobile device or something, that's no longer possible. So they're leaning into collaboration tools to make that experience possible, to still stay connected with their teams, to be able to be, effective, but also deliver those great service level experiences that your customers expect every day. And so I think some of the challenges here are going to be, if we think forward on this, is how do we manage, to Mike's point, delivering those service levels to customers, providing that flexibility to employees, and doing that in a way that is a simple enough experience for customers, something that they've come to expect, and also using secure and reliable technology to fill in the gaps of where teams used to be together in a space and now they're distributed workforce. So how can technology fill that gap in some way, and also provide management with that visibility to understand where are there gaps in team performance, where can we dive in and help a more junior technician get up to speed and coach them on delivering better service to their customers. So I think the future of work is a huge shift from where we were 2 years ago. I think a lot of businesses are still grappling with how do we somehow honor the hybrid work culture, but do so in a way that puts the customer at the center of everything we do still.
Great. Yeah, and we're actually in the process of running a survey right now that's going to quantify some of those issues about who's seeing a massive increase in the amount of tickets that are coming through. How are they dealing with that? What is the effect on agents, et cetera? So it's an area of great interest, I think, across the entire industry. It also speaks to the evolution of channel strategies. So we were moving as an industry towards omni-channel at various rates, depending on the organization. And that's been accelerated by the pandemic and the impacts that have come out of that. Marnie, how can tech support organizations maximize the value of channels that gain traction during the pandemic, like remote video and sources of data that inform customer profiles in real time, things like sensors and smart building and IoT devices?
Yeah, and I'll just be really transparent here. This is an area that we struggle with. So this is, well, we've created these new channels. We've created them almost in a multi-channel approach versus an omni-channel. And so we're at the point now to figure out, okay, how do we take these things that didn't exist before and create kind of that single pane of glass, that single view in, so we can see that holistic experience that the customers experience, as well as the support agent. So I can see, oh, you went and you bought something from the vending machine and it's not working, or we've got a smart locker, or we've got chat, or we've got self-service, we've got the virtual agent, we've got all of these things and ways that they can interact with us. But we have yet to bring all of those really in to a single frame so we can see it all. And that's something that we cannot let our foot off the gas. We have to solve for, because this is the way we are headed. We're not going to, we have no plans to reduce any of these channels, right? They've proven to be successful. They've not only proven to be successful, but from an experience perspective, you know, and an engagement like employee experience, like they are very, very happy to have these different avenues that they can engage with us and or self-serve. So we just we have to figure out how do we leverage that? How do we leverage the information that's coming through these systems, as well as just that view in the interaction that customer is having with us?
Sure. That's great. Mike, how are you looking at the evolution of channel strategies?
Well, I mean, I think that it's really important as we start living in more and more of a virtual world and having so many of these different devices that are tied into that, to have really good monitoring and reporting processes in place that can enable, you know, basically customer-facing dashboards. For example, some incident management tools have an event management module that can plug into these monitoring tools and provide real-time reports or outage information and things like that. But I think what it all really comes down to is that all of this stuff has to feed a good process of communication, and never underestimate, you know, the value of that. Technology is there to enable us to do that. There's still humans behind it. For example, you know, you want to have a really good, a really well-built knowledge base. That knowledge base then feeds into those self-service dashboards or FAQs. You know, your problem management process keeps us on top of, you know, trending, what's happening in our environment. You know, it helps us drill down into root causes of issues. You know, our change management process keeps everybody informed on what's happening, right? What's upcoming maintenance, new processes, and things like that. So really, from my perspective, good communication and keeping everyone, whether that be our customers, the business, or even our employees, informed, it has to, you know, it has a lot of value, and technology is there as a facilitator to those human interactions.
Sure, and it's critical. We all know that the experience of having to explain yourself over and over again as you kind of move through channels for a single call, and that can get incredibly frustrating. The opposite, when the tech or other agent knows exactly what your situation is, the equipment you're using, et cetera, and can start right off with a discussion about your issues. That's hugely powerful. Marie, can you give us your view on channel and the role of omnichannel as we move into this new world?
Yeah, so I think, you know, Mike, I think you mentioned something about visibility and transparency. And one of the trends that we saw coming during the pandemic was, as the in-store experience went away, it was replaced. There was still a need to provide that in-store experience or that in-home experience. So if you were a broadband service provider, you were no longer able to walk into a consumer's residential address and help install their broadband service, right? And so one of the things as a remote support provider that we saw take off was really the use of camera streaming to be able to virtually stand shoulder to shoulder with your customer and see what they're experiencing with a disconnected device, like, you know, setting up your router, or we helped employees set up their printers or their work from home offices. So the ability to use the camera on a consumer's mobile device and have your technician be able to see them stream what's happening in front of them and provide them with step-by-step instructions, even annotations to help them troubleshoot or do setup for things like that. So that was how one way we saw organizations really stepping forward and taking a different channel strategy of how do I replicate the in-person experience using the person's mobile phone to really create that, you know, side-by-side support model to help customers get the support they need in a time when it wasn't possible to be physically connected.
Right.
So
I
that's
think that
something
is.
we expect to see continue moving on, is, the speed and immediacy. And one thing I think that's important there is one of the things we also saw over the last 2 years is this great resignation, right? Across all industries, whether it's, tech support or trucking, there's a shortage of skilled workers. And so even if it's not just moving forward, providing that visual support to your customers, but even to your field technicians who might be junior technicians in the field, to have a senior technician back at home or back in the office who's providing that expert counsel to them in that moment, and they're the feet on the street. So being able to have that visual connection, I think, is something that's really promising for customer experience and support.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's really important. We spend, all of us, and probably most of the people on this call, we spend our days involved with tech at a pretty deep level. But so many of our customers, especially as you're talking about B2C or even small business support, you're dealing with folks who don't have that level of tech familiarity or knowledge. So even the ability to explain something can be extremely difficult. So some of these tools are, I think, just absolutely irreplaceable. And that brings us nicely into our next topic, which is really the role of human capital in a digital first world. And look, thinking about the Great Resignation, you brought that up, the fact that, the sort of tech skill pipeline is a little bit uncertain these days. Mike, I'll start with you. How can tech support organizations optimize staffing strategy for a digital first world, in terms of finding a mix between full-time and part-time staff, contingent workers, leveraging supply chain partners, et cetera?
Yeah, well, it really comes down to, understanding that managing a distributed and a remote team takes a very different management approach than what we may have been used to in the past. A lot of times in the past, you can get up and walk around and see how things are going. Today, everything is distributed. And it makes things a lot more difficult to manage. Many managers are actually uncomfortable with having a remote model like this, but the world isn't just changing; it has changed, right? And we have to adapt to that. So how do we leverage that staff? Surveys have kind of shown that there's an expectation now that remote work is normal. Many people won't even consider taking a job without the option of working from home. Unfortunately, not everybody can work from home effectively, and that really becomes clear, especially if you have a larger team. The more people you have, the higher odds are that somebody's not going to be able to perform well. So, and taking phone calls all day is a tough job, and it's easy to get distracted. I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced that. So, one of the things that we've done is we've had to work closely with our HR department and our recruiters to use what we do is we use contract employees, do temp to perm. We can kind of try somebody to make sure that they're going to be able to do the work. And then, if they work out really well, we convert them to an FTE. All the other things that you have to do is you have to understand you got to be serious about filling these roles. If you've looked for work recently, you can see that by job description, sometimes the folks are looking for the absolute perfect person, or it's obvious they have somebody internal in mind. So you have to be very careful about how you build job descriptions, and you be willing to be a lot more accommodating now than you may have been in the past.
Sure. Marie, you're building the tools that enable all of these capabilities and give people a way to leverage perhaps less experienced workforce, et cetera. Can you talk to us a little bit about, from a solution provider point of view, how do you guys approach those issues?
For us, we're not necessarily involved with the staffing for these types of scenarios, but I would say, when we look at the tools that we provide for remote support like Rescue, it's providing supervisors with visibility into agent performance. So whether it's a command center dashboard that allows them to see, how many calls an agent's taking, what's their average handle time or things like that. And then also being able to provide real-time monitoring, so listening in on calls so that you can provide that real-time coaching I think those are some of the capabilities that we've been kind of bringing forward to help teams as these organizations look at how do we staff better. Again, I think I wonder from you guys, how much has to be done in terms of training for on-site training or real-time training to build capabilities into a newer workforce, or retraining other workers to fill these gaps in your contact center and make sure that they can leverage the tool set in front of them as well to manage the work and provide. And I think a lot of times also it's like if you have the right persona of person, they're trainable, right? So it's all about, I think a lot of it comes down to leadership and training in order to take someone who has the persona that you're looking for. They have empathy, they care about the customer, and maybe they have a little bit of tech savvy in them. Put those two together with good training and coaching, and you could potentially have an all-star performer.
Right.
Yeah,
And
so
I think,
I'll double down on that. And so that's kind of what our philosophy has shifted. And it's we hire for fit and we train for skill. And so we look for people that have the aptitude and the attitude to really want to do this work. And then we worry about getting them the technical savvy, how to self-solve and how to be able to provide that support on a technical level for our customers. So I think you hit the nail on the head there with that one, Marie.
Yeah, I can echo that as well, real quick, if you don't mind. I mean, you have to be willing to provide that more upfront training rather than trying to go looking for somebody that already has it. And when it comes time to hire, how long is it going to take? Extended recruitment processes have gone away. You can't take a long time to hire anymore. It's pretty much a worker's market. And if you're taking a month to decide on who to hire, the odds are that person's not going to be there when you're ready to hire them. So, I mean, I've lost people after only a week or so. So, I mean, you got to be fast. You got to move very, very, very quickly nowadays.
And I'm wondering, Mike, is there also, because the market is so hot for, everyone's looking to hire. Let's put it that way. Do you find that once you've trained someone, you've onboarded them, maybe you've taken, they've got the aptitude, we've given them some of the skills training, and now they're onboarded. Are they staying longer because they feel like you've invested in them and made some commitment to their growth? Or is the turnover still problematic in tech support?
We've had to go both ways recently. I mean, PSCU has a very good company culture anyway. They're very, very employee focused, so they're very good in that respect. However, lately we've noticed we've had a bit more turnover than we're used to, and a lot of it has been because I think it's just natural. A call center type environment, contact center type environment is a little bit more stressful, whether you're working at an office or working at home. And so we've had a few people basically telling us I can go somewhere else and have less stress in my life. So we have a good company culture. We've got a lot of people who've been here for a really long time, but we also have recently had a lot of people turn over just simply because they're saying I go somewhere else and get a better deal.
Yeah, and really quick, just to I don't want to go down too far on the compensation rabbit hole, but one of the things too that we've found with the pivot remote is if you do like a geographically loaded wage based off of a market of where an individual resides, it is tough to compete with that with organizations that have gone fully remote and they said, I don't care where you are, we're going to pay the same across the board. And so depending on where your contact centers might primarily be located and where you're hiring talent, it's ruffling. It's kicking up some dust a little bit.
So competition becomes global now, right? Where before it was regionalized. It's
And I think that also speaks to enabling and empowering employees that maybe don't have the full set of skill sets, but they do have the right personality and the right drive. And as long as you give them the tools and the knowledge management system, et cetera, to enable their success, maybe that addresses some of those difficult issues. But one of the other issues that comes up with a remote workforce is, how do you keep track of their work? How do you make sure that they're working well? How do you help them improve and advance themselves? And I'm going to start again with Mike on this. How should organizations think about monitoring performance fairly and effectively? Because that is an area of stress for workers if they feel that they're being, constantly micromanaged and sort of spied on, you might even say. So that seems like a really important piece to once you've got these people on, you've got them onboarded, you've kind of inculcated them with your culture, and now you've got to keep them happy. And how do you go about doing that in terms of fairness and effectiveness in a remote world?
Yeah, and I found this to be one of those really interesting questions because I follow a number of different forums online and things like that, and I've seen discussions about this. I've heard some folks say that if you're in a call center environment, everybody should be on camera, right? They want to be able to monitor their folks in real time from the time they log on to the time they log out. And I don't like that approach at all. It sounds a little bit too big brotherish to me. And while the service desk staff are generally considered to be kind of entry level from a technical perspective, I still feel they deserve some respect and will generally act professionally. So I'm not one in favor of that level of monitoring where you're keeping your thumb on people all the time. Besides, as a management person, who's going to be able to spend all their time watching somebody on camera anyway? However, in a remote world, we do have to become a little bit more rigid in some ways. I know here at PSCU, we had to start looking at scheduling a lot more closely because if everybody's in the same room, it's easy to see who gets up and goes on break and things like that. Virtually, that's not so easy. So while I wouldn't go so far as to require people to have to raise their hand if they have to go to the bathroom, I do think that depending on the size of the org and the size of the type of coverage that you need, breaks and lunches may need to be scheduled, rigidly in order to kind of maintain those proper staffing levels. So what we've done at PSU is we actually started scheduling lunches, but we've tried to remain pretty flexible with breaks, but we're watching it closely. If it becomes an issue, we may have to start scheduling them as well, but so far so good. But it's really just, it becomes a lot more dependent upon watching your call management systems, watching your ticket loads, things like that. You got to pay a lot more attention to data than maybe you had in the past.
Sure. And Marnie, there's few organizations out there that have a more dispersed workforce than T-Mobile. You guys are in every town practically in America, right? So I imagine that this is an area that you're dealing with on a regular basis.
It is, and I think the thing here is I like to say it's less about what the employees in the support center are doing, and it's more about how their leaders are leading. And this really becomes an area where leaders have to lead from a place of trust. They have to. And we set the parameters, we set the framework. To Mike's point, perhaps it's a schedule, what have you, but you've got the data. The data is going to tell you how many calls they took, when they were logged in, when they were on break, all of those different things. We even have quality processes, to check the quality of the calls and the things that they're doing. So having those compensating controls, have them be there just as such. So something that you can reference and you can really refer to as something, but just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not working and doesn't mean that they're not working effectively. And that's a big shift for leaders who are used to being in the flesh, in a room with their people, being able to see everybody, see that they're actively, hear that little buzz that's happening in the contact center, right? The little hum because everybody's on the phone. When you miss that, you really have to, you have to put that trust in your employees to trust that they are doing the work that you've set out for them, and then leverage the information to say, okay, should we have a conversation about this? Should we maybe coach? And then when you do have to have those conversations, again, is how do you frame it? How do you keep them engaged so they don't feel like they're being micromanaged? So instead of, why did you only take 6 calls? Right? It's, hey, I've looked at on average, you normally take this amount. This day we were having this, and being able to have more like a coaching and leading conversation at that point, because everybody's stressed, right? We know that. And even though we're in our new normal, people working in the office, working at home, whatever, it's a high stress job. It's not an easy job to be frontline support. And so how do we continue to show up and how do we continue to engage with them, let them know that they're a person, not just a number on a report, and really show that we want to provide that care and feeding for them and we want them to be successful. And so we've really shifted to really work to train up our managers, our frontline managers, to really make this kind of mindset shift in how we operate and how we interact with one another.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
So
did you have to put some training in place? Because again, it's a mindset shift. Did you have to change the hiring profile at all as well for your managers, or you just look for different?
So that's an interesting thing because we really focus heavily on internal growth and development. So we really try to promote internally into these frontline manager roles. And so I would say the recruitment itself didn't change, but definitely the focus and emphasis on skills that folks have demonstrated and their ability to be able to lead in that manner is definitely something that we look for more so than we would have ever looked at in the past.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to a point that both you guys made, to take that information, the data around performance, around what's happening right now, and use that to help train and upskill and frame it in here's what we can do to make your job and your life better, rather than we're watching you and you're not doing exactly what we want to say, and make it punitive. So, Marie, from your perspective, how do you guys look at the whole performance monitoring management issue?
I mean, it's definitely something we've seen customers ask for. That's why we built some of those, real-time monitoring into our product. That's why we have performance dashboards and, a really robust reporting infrastructure so that you can run reports on all different, metrics around the agent or agent groups to help, give supervisors that visibility into how agents are performing, into how a specific team might be performing. And then it comes back to that. How do those managers effectively coach and train up their teams?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that.
Go ahead.
Just to add to that real quick.
Go ahead,
sharing that data can be very important too. I mean, I think that, because we're remote, we can't watch how people are actually working. When you do have a performance issue, it's surprising how quickly that performance issue will self-correct when you start sharing the data with folks. For example, we had an issue for a while where we had a few folks who were kind of gaming. They would go unavailable, they'd get a call, they'd let the call roll over, so it would go into ring on no answer. And then as soon as they would go into after aux work, they would immediately go back onto available. So their availability stats were really high. But when we started sharing the data with them, we had some folks that were skipping as many calls as they were taking. So as soon as they realized we were actually using the data and we were looking at it and we were sharing it with them, our ring on no answer rates are now negligible because everybody's aware we're watching and we're gathering that information. So sharing it and being communicative about what you're doing and setting those expectations is really, really important.
And it's a different watch, right? It's not the watch that you said of like, I've got a camera on you. It's watching the data and let the data speak for itself.
Right. So that's interesting, Mike. That's a different take on gamification for sure. Marnie, are you guys looking to leverage, and I apologize if there's noise in the background, my remodelers just got back. Are there ways that organizations can leverage those capabilities to support their other priorities that we were talking about, training and development, opportunities to upskill staff, et cetera? Is that something that you guys are pursuing, wrapping it into a gamification to keep people engaged and active?
We haven't gone down the gamification route. It's definitely something that we're looking at because we have realized that, I think to Mike's earlier hiring point, right, you can't lose people in the pipeline. You have to move quick. And so we've had to look at our whole training and development program from onboarding to that continual and next level training. We've had to really kind of tip that on its head and say, okay, how could we do this different and what does it look like? So how do we turn things into small digestible chunks that are on-demand trainings versus in the past, you may have sat in a classroom and then you may have sat next to another analyst and then you have an analyst sit with you and all those sorts of things. And so we're looking at all of the different options to figure out how do we pivot and how do we make it so it's consumable, so it's engaging and so it's successful. And I think gamification is definitely one of those things I think is kind of the next generation feeding into this. We treat our service center as the springboard of talent into IT and careers in IT. And so realizing that we're getting a lot of early and career folks in here, we need to find a way that keeps them engaged and they're not feeling like it's fully academic and everything else that we do to help train and develop them. Mute again.
I just have to have a thing where when I stop talking, it mutes, and when I start again, it just knows to start up. I'll talk to Jabra about that. Mike, are you pursuing any of those kinds of initiatives?
Yeah, not the gamification so much, but but training is definitely important. Training seems to be one of those things that everybody wants, but few actually follow through with. So the way I feel is that as leaders, we can help facilitate that. For example, at PSU, one of the things that we've done is we've made training a part of everybody's annual goals. And we have committed to the staff that we will give them a minimum of 40 hours for each team member. So that overcomes that common "I don't have time" objection. So depending on the employee, it could be anything from online web-based training up to a full-on in-person instruction. We have really the benefit of having a really good training budget, fortunately. And one of the things that I've made clear is that everyone on my team within the service desk, they have to maintain an HDI certification. So that includes myself, my managers, the leads, everyone. So we were Pinnacle last year, which means everybody had an HDI cert. We've added some staff, so we're in the process of getting them certified as well. So hopefully we'll be Pinnacle this year as well. We also have a really good, PSU has a really good online training system. And at the service desk, I don't want us to be so focused on, this training needs to be job related. So if someone wants to learn more about IT security or agile or network or pretty much anything, I'm okay with that. We're okay with that. So because, as I mentioned, service desk is generally kind of that entry-level technical role. I want to see my folks succeed. So if they want to move on to network or to security, I'm more than happy to help facilitate that by getting them the training to do it. But and that actually helps with retention as well if they know that we're willing to help them move up in the ranks within the company.
Marie, are you hearing that from clients? Desire to tie some of the monitoring and measurement into some of these other initiatives as well?
I think what we've seen over the last, we've seen a huge increase in customers that are coming to us to get more training on our technology. Either they're ramping up staff or they are just recognizing they need to improve the performance of their teams, and they realize, well, the training is free. There's support articles. There's a whole community that they can engage with to learn more about the product, to help, I understand how other service providers are leveraging our technology. So I think what we've seen is just an increase in the need to make sure that their teams are going back to basics, getting that training on how to use the technology, even, to understand the full breadth of the product. A lot of people come in with a specific use case for rescue, for remote support, and then recognize like, oh, you know what, I want to provide more VIP support to a select group of customers. So I might want to, what other options do you have for me? Or because our employees are all remote now and our tech support is all remote, we need to really up our security infrastructure, and we need to look at, making sure, our CISO is looking at us and saying, hey, we want to know what every tool you're using and make sure that it is highly secure from scammers and malicious actors and things like that. And there's a lot within Rescue to unpack there. Whether it's domain restriction, IP restrictions, company domain description, security, all these different levers that you can pull to make it as impenetrable as possible from a bad actor taking control of your remote support tool. So that's some of the things that we've seen customers come back to us for either, group trainings or one-on-one trainings to really learn more about some of the more complex parts of the product that can really help them in a hybrid world.
Yeah, great. Let's see, I got a little bit distracted there with my muting problems, and just want to make sure that we stay on track here. One of the things that brings up, first of all, it's clear, Marie, that you guys are listening very closely to the voice of the customer. And there's the other side of that, I think, which is also equally important, or perhaps more important, because my feel is happy agents make happy customers, but the importance of attending to the voice of the employee as well as the voice of the customer. And I'll let you start off on that, Marie. Is that something that can be captured and enhanced through the tools that are chosen?
With us, our technology, we definitely have customer satisfaction surveys that you can utilize. With regard to employee satisfaction, it's not necessarily something, I mean, for us, it's all about usage. So if we see fewer technicians using the tool, there's clearly an employee dissatisfaction. Perhaps they don't have the training they need to be successful using a remote support tool. Oftentimes, it's somewhat of the personality of a technician who might say, like, I'm a senior solver, I don't need a remote support tool. A manager might look at that, though, and realize, well, their average handle time is far longer than their peers who are using a remote support tool. We need to train that person on using that tool. Maybe they're dissatisfied with it, or maybe they're lack of engagement they have doing, with taking calls or whatnot. But, I think probably the employee satisfaction is something more that Marnie and Michael can speak to, but definitely, we look at usage as kind of an indicator of, not necessarily disengagement with the tool, and perhaps needing new training on the tool to get engaged and recognize the power and how it can help them improve their productivity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Marnie, do you want to weigh in on this? On the voice of the employee?
Yeah, and it goes to kind of where you started, Tim, happy agents equal happy customers, right? So that's key. But I think that, there's a couple things here. We used to survey monthly. We used to survey and do employee engagement surveys once a month, but we would only do a small subset of a population. And so we found that those answers and the themes that we would get could be highly skewed. So we've switched now, and we do quarterly engagement of the entire population. That's one way to solicit feedback. But those are very general, kind of, general high level sentiment, like how are things, how are you feeling like you're supported? It doesn't get us to the real basics of maybe like a certain technical aspect that they want to provide a solution for, or they've got ideas into. And so there's a couple things with that. And one is through routine, sensing with your team, and what other listening systems do you have in place? And it could be through a weekly, like a one-on-one sync conversation. It could just be informally checking in. Hey, how are things going? But really what it boils down to, I think, are two things. And one is, if you're going to ask them for feedback, you better be prepared to take action on it. Right. And if you can't take action, be transparent and let them know why. Like, hey, that's a really good idea, but we're limited. Maybe there's a security thing. Who knows? Right. Something that would be a barrier to doing what they're bringing forward. But you have to be prepared to act on it. And if you don't, you will immediately fall in that trap. You will lose trust. They're never going to tell you anything again. So there's that. And then the second is, make sure that you're getting the information from those who are closest to the work. Don't go ask the managers. Go ask the people who are doing the work day in and day out. Ask them how their tools are working for them, what processes they feel could be improved. What's like, if I always, with my team, when I go out and I round in the field and I give them my magic wand question, I said, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and you could solve like one big pain point, and it could be a little thing, but it's just like that death by 1,000 paper cuts little thing, like, what would you solve? And the information that I get back just out of those conversations, I mean, has turned into many, many, many improvements, be it process, be it technical, and what have you. And when we do that, and when we are fostering and caring for our support agents, that in turn is providing better support for our end customers.
Sure. And Mike, I know you're a huge believer in continuous process improvement, and obviously the people piece of that is very, very important. How do you look at this topic?
Well, I think Marnie stole my answer. Yeah, you're right. I'm a big process improvement guy. I spent a lot of years running continuous improvement projects. So, I got my Six Sigma certification, all that good stuff. But one of the things when you do that is you learn very, very quickly is if you want to know how something works, talk to the people who do the work. Don't talk to their managers, because I can't tell you how many times I've had those discussions with managers who were insisting that they knew exactly how this was working, only to find out from a focus group that no, they weren't even close. They were far, far from the truth. It's human nature for people to take the path of least resistance, and that can be good or that can be bad, but you're never going to know unless you talk to them and find out. So, I can absolutely echo what Marnie said. Let's have your focus groups, have your skip level sessions, listen to what people have to say, and then act on what they say. And if you do act on it, make sure you're marketing it to the team so people know that you've listened and you're actually doing something about it.
Yeah, for sure. And, I mean, I think, one of the things that, that we see, especially in the, 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 I'm wondering if you guys are seeing any organizations that are doing a particularly good job of capturing and acting on employee input. I'll start with you, Mike.
Well, I mean, I think generally speaking, my feeling has always been that the kind of the generic company survey or corporate survey, it doesn't really work well for IT. I mean, it kind of gives you a high level view into how people are feeling, but it doesn't really give much feedback from how are we doing technologically? How are your team specifically doing? So at PSU, what we've kind of set up is I've asked all of my managers, you have one-on-ones with your team at least once a month, right? And my feeling has always strongly been that, you get to the end of the year, you start doing annual evaluations. That should just be another one-on-one meeting. Nobody should be going into that not knowing where they stand. So as part of those one-on-ones, we ask for their feedback. We go over, talk about these are some things that we're doing. What would you suggest, or how would you suggest we adjust this or adapt this? We've also set up what we call the idea box, which is a Microsoft Teams-based suggestion box. Anyone can submit an idea. We've got some really good ones too, ones that we were willing to spend some time and resources to set up. We went in and made some changes to our incident management tool and our support processes. And then we rewarded those people as well. I mean, we identified who they were during one of our monthly staff meetings or town hall meetings, and basically said, this person suggested this. So if this is making your life easier, go thank Keith. He did it. So good things can happen if you keep an open mind and you listen to folks.
And it seems to me that this gets just much more critical as we move from single channel to multi-channel to omni-channel, where this piece of the tool may be working, but that piece of the tool is causing a huge problem for individual users. Marie, any examples from your perspective of, and of course not naming any names, but any clients who are doing a particularly good job in thinking about how to take the information that your tools deliver and using that for voice of the employee?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I agree with Mike. I think that idea is excellent internally in our own company. I'd say over the last 2 years, taking those we do an employee pulse survey every month, and the verbatims are what really catch people sometimes as well, right? You can really see into the heart and soul of your employees. But those are some of the things that the company took action on. And when people are remote and feeling disconnected, acting on some of those things have been the biggest connectors. They've really helped, crystallize the culture that many were worried was dissipating because of no longer being in the office together. And it's those things that really showed the empathy of the organization, that you're still listening, you're still leaning in to hear your employees and advocate for them. So I agree, like taking note, pulling some of those out and really being able to act on them because they add value. And these are the people that are closest to the work. And so, I think it's been an effective tool within our organization for sure.
Yeah. And I just want to add, because one point that Mike made that I want to make sure didn't get lost is that you don't even necessarily need to reward, but you need to recognize what you want more of. And so as you see those things coming out, celebrate that win. Right. And call attention to it and really make sure that others are seeing like, wait, they brought that forward. I had no idea we could bring suggestions forward, and things like that, or be part of a solution. And so that leads to that empowerment and enablement and engagement with the staff. So I just want to make sure that didn't get lost. You need to call attention to it. Call out those wins when they happen.
Yeah, and maybe a bug bounty type thing would get pretty expensive pretty quickly. But yeah, just to say, hey, this was a great idea, and here's who brought it up for us, and we're all doing better for it.
What's that saying? People want to live in a world they help create, or whatever that is. Like, there's no payoff there other than like they want to be part of the solving the problem and getting that recognition, especially if you're someone junior in an organization. That's a huge confidence boost. That's something that really goes a long way, and that makes their peers look at them. Like you said, that's the gamification right there, right?
Sure.
Their peers want to stand up and get the same recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're down to looks like 9 minutes or so. So of course we're not going to go deep on what is a huge topic, but what I've sort of put together is the role of non-human capital in a digital-first world. And I'm going to start with you, Mike. What technologies are you seeing proving essential? We've talked about a lot of them, but if you could go through just a little bit more detail, what technologies are proving essential in this new world of tech support?
Well, I think you have to have a really, really good, robust and reliable incident management system, and it has to be something that has all the modules. Even if you're not using all of them today, start with your incident management, maybe start with your request management. Make sure that it's got the capability that you can scale for the future. Is it multi-channel? I mean, today you're only taking voice calls, but tomorrow you may have to use chat, or tomorrow you may have to use email or social media or something like that. So make sure your incident management system is capable. Remote support tools are also, I think, increasingly important. I think for many years the HDI survey was showing that was one of the number one tools within our environment to be able to remotely support folks. We learned through the course of our pandemic how important video conferencing is, setting all that stuff up. And, from a contact center perspective, having a really good call management system is critical. We've been looking at contact center as a service, which is basically cloud-based call management, and we'll hopefully be rolling that out within the next month or so. So all of these things are contribute to a really good environment. You have to be prepared because you never know what they call disruptive technology is going to come along next. I mean, you got to think about 2 years ago, who would ever have thought we'd be where we are today with video conferencing? I look at Zoom and WebEx and all that kind of stuff as being one of those disruptive techs, right? They were commonplace in a business environment, but now everybody's using it. My parents, my grandparents would be using it, because if you want to go to church, you got to have a web conference for a while. So, what disruptive tech is coming next that we're going to have to deal with. So you have to have that technology there and prepared and ready to go.
Sure. Marie, obviously, you guys provide many of these tools. If you could talk a little bit about the ones that are, critical now, and then anything that you see coming down the road that
Sure.
clients are looking to use.
I mean, I think for certain the video conferencing, we have GoToMeeting and GoToConnect, and I've hosted many a birthday party over GoToConnect. Unfortunately for my 4-year-old. But, it was also the one thing that really, felt like we were still connecting with our team on day to day. My company has always been a video-faced company. All of our meetings are done on video, and I think that provides that connectivity for employees. Like I talked about Rescue, a remote support tool, like you need a robust and reliable, scalable, and secure remote support tool in today's day and age. There's just no escaping it. As you look at improving performance of your agents, of, being able to provide good service to your customers and see what they're seeing and solve issues fast, like that is critical. The video component of that, to be able to see things that are not a mobile device or a desktop or laptop, to help them with whether it's your, installing your washer, or, we have a customer in the UK. It was like, we are using it because we have customers who purchase an appliance and do not know if they are on gas or electric. And as we're confirming their order, we're asking them to pull their stove out so we can just see the connection in the back to understand, because otherwise that's a truck roll, right? And that's hundreds of dollars lost. Because the customer I don't know how that's possible, but didn't know that, or didn't know the width of their door frame enough to know, could we get the appliance in their door and up their staircase? So all these things, and making sure that the product is, usable for less tech savvy people. Like, these are things that are incredibly important. I think in the future, it's how do we bring more collaboration into the remote support environment? Talking about that single pane of glass, but also just like not, consolidating some of the tools that you have and making it a little bit easier for the agent to not have 30 tabs open. Maybe it's 15. But being able to collaborate with other technicians in the tool, inviting them into a session is critical. Even being able, at some point within your own teams, your own employee support issues as well, to have employees use, your Slacker teams to start a remote session or get remote support from your internal help desk. These are all things that we're looking at, is how do we bring the tools closer together, simplify the work for employees, and make it a lot easier for your customers to get faster support.
Yeah, and I think, Marnie, that's all very good news for the ROI on your 5G investments. For sure. How are you guys approaching the tools you need now and the tools that you see the needs that you see coming down the road?
Yeah, very similar to, I think, what Mike kind of led in with in terms of collaboration tools and a solid ITSM. We're going through ITSM migration right now, but I want to call out knowledge base. So don't underestimate the power of clean and current, accurate knowledge, because that's what your agents are going to rely on. That's what any self-help, self-service tool is going to rely on. That's what your virtual bot's going to rely on. AI, everything is pointed at this. And so I won't bore you with lessons learned there, but don't underestimate the power of clean knowledge. And if you aren't focused on that, I would encourage you to focus on that area if you've got all those other things dialed in.
That's great. So we're down to about 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys kind of share with us your final thoughts. I'm going to let Mike lead us off on that, if you would.
Well, I think that really everything that we do really has to be with an eye to, how is this going to improve what we're doing? How does this improve us? Whether that be customer satisfaction, efficiency, cost savings, employee satisfaction, any of those things. And that's a real balancing act, because if you go into one area and improve it, it might have an impact in unsuspected ways elsewhere. The technology is important. It ties in there because technology is our facilitator, right? It's what we use to accomplish many of our improvements. But it shouldn't just be tech for the sake of tech. We have to always understand people matter. They remain at the core of what we do. They're the core of our operations. So we want to make sure we're providing that recognition for performance, that we celebrate our accomplishments. As our world changes, continue being more empathetic, more aware that there's maybe a higher expectation of a good work-life balance, and understanding the challenges that are involved in finding the people who can perform well in this new distributed virtual world that we're living in.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's going to be, I hope one of the really good things that comes out of all this is that there will be process evolution that will continue on even as we get back to the office or to whatever hybrid environment we're going to be working in. Marnie, your last thoughts?
I would leave you all with my favorite quote, which is, "A fool with a tool is still a fool." And so keeping that in mind, before you jump into a technology head first, is let's look at your people, let's look at the experience, let's look at the processes, and make sure that the technology we're bringing in is a right fit for the solution that we need and the experience we want to deliver. Because without people, without processes, technology alone can't hold it. So that's what I would leave everybody with today.
Great. And Marie, first of all, thank you, thank Rescue and GoTo for sponsoring what I think has been a fantastic conversation today. And if we get your last thoughts on this very important topic.
I agree. It comes down to experience, both of your technicians and your customers. And I think the digital experience is going to become a bigger footprint than it has in the past, and it's going to continue to grow. And I think as part of that experience, we need to make sure that we're using technology that helps foster that relationship of trust with your consumers. They need to know that, especially in a remote environment, that the technician they're working with is someone they can trust. The technology they're using is something that is safe and secure for them, and that it's, and how your organization can look to accomplish that by, using something that's super secure, but working with a vendor that can help you make sure you make that experience your own, or it reflects your brand. those are some of the things that I think are going to have huge payoffs. Experience still matters, and your consumers are still judging you against the Apples and Amazons of the world. And as much as we can create something that is simplistic and easy for them, it will go such a long way in ensuring customer satisfaction for the long run. I want to thank both Marnie and Michael and Tim, all of you today, for being on today's call. It's been an awesome experience. I've loved listening to your years of experience and how you guys are doing it and within your businesses. So kudos to you and your teams.
Great. Thank you, everybody. That is all the time we have today. Unfortunately, I think I could continue this conversation all night long. Maybe we will in Vegas in a couple of months. Thank you, everyone who joined us today for the webinar. Remember that there will be a follow-up email that will include a link to view a recording of today's presentation. So if you found it useful and interesting, please share that with your colleagues. Once you leave the event today, a short survey is going to pop up in your browser window. We really appreciate if you take the time to share your feedback on this webinar. It helps us make sure that future webinars really fit your needs and your interests. And with that, I'm going to say once again, thank you to our panelists. It was really, really great. And we will see you guys next time.